This will provide kind of a policy foundation for our committee as we move forward, dealing with various issues that touch on the children in Georgia. We're going to deviate a little bit from the printed agenda in the order. We're going to hear from the GBI first. They are all ready to go, so we'll recognize Director Keenan. Director Keenan.
Madam Chairman, Chair Lady, and
And
members of the
Vernon,
committee.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Director. Vernon Keenan is actually one of my constituents. So anyway, so he is my boss in that respect. So
We're proud
I
of
do.
the work you do as a citizen of Cherokee County.
Well, thank you, Director. So I'll turn it over to you.
I am Vernon Keenan, the Director of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and the Child Fatality Review Panel is a unit in the GBI. And the Child Fatality Review Panel has a responsibility to collect information on child deaths in Georgia, analyze those deaths, and then make policy recommendations to public officials, legislatures, and others on how we can prevent child death in Georgia. So part of their mechanism that they work is collecting from the 159 counties those child deaths. And each of those counties has a review committee itself made up of various coroners, medical examiners, law enforcement, prosecutors, anyone who had DFACs, anyone who has a role or responsibility in the area of child fatality. And so what we'll be doing today is rolling out our report for 2016, which completes the analysis for that year of the child deaths. Now, another mission of the Child Fatality Review Panel is to train law enforcement, coroners, medical examiners on how to conduct child fatality investigations. This is a very specialized area of criminal investigation, and it requires specialized training. Now, I want to show you something that this is not a toy. This is an investigative tool. It is a reenactment doll that the investigators use when they are doing a child fatality investigation. And we have provided over 500 of these to local law enforcement who have these types of responsibilities. And these were paid for by the Georgia drug dealers through their assets, which were condemned by the court. And then we use them to provide reenactment tools. Now, the way this would be used, the investigators would go to the scene, be with the child giver and people who found the child, and then reenact the scene using the doll. And it helps us have a clear understanding about what has happened at that scene. And many times we will see what the caregiver is saying happened was an impossibility based on the reenactment. So not a toy, a very valuable investigative tool. So with that, I'd like to call on Special Agent in Charge Trevor Randall, who heads up the Child Fatality Review Panel, and she will introduce her staff, and we'll get into the report.
Thank you, Director. As Director Keenan mentioned, we have at GBI have the responsibilities for the Child Fatality Review Unit since 2014 legislatively, thanks to yours truly. And we have been in the process of trying to revamp some of the things that maybe were not working well, but the things that were already working well highlight that, but the core mission remains the same. So we do that with a pretty small staff or team at GBI. Some of them who are here, Siobhan Jones, many of you have heard from before. She's our child death prevention specialist, and she focuses on all things prevention. She stepped out a second ago. We have Dr. Carter, who's retired Emory. He's our epidemiologist, who none of this would be possible without his brain, taking all of the information as to why all children die in Georgia and putting it in a format that we can understand. Dr. Carter, if you would wave your hand. And we have our newest member of the team, Alex Hart. She's our intern from Kennesaw, so she hit the ground running and was able to help with this as well. So like I mentioned, we have about 5 full-time staff that work on this constantly. That's all they do is child fatality review and prevention. It's important also to acknowledge, obviously, the members of the panel that are here. Representative Ballinger is actually governor appointed to the Child Fatality Review Panel. So we do have our panel of appointees under the leadership of Judge Latane Kell out of Cobb County Superior Court. So we thank her for her service on that committee, and that's one of the reasons why we're here as well. So to jump right into the data, we always want to make sure that we give a little background and explanation. When we talk about child death review, understand that we can't tell you the story of the cases we review without giving you the vital record information. So I know that may be a little hard to read, but you should have it there in front of you. When you look at all deaths of children in Georgia, it's usually pretty shocking to citizens when they find out, well, we had 1,529 kids die in the year of review. So the last year of review was 2016. And the reason that is as we were talking about earlier, 2017 cases are still coming in. They're still being reviewed at the local level, and that could be for many reasons. A case could still be under investigation where it was a gray case, as in many instances of these sleep-related cases. So they have to wait on the autopsy. They have to wait on toxicology reports, and sometimes that takes a while. So the local review committee may table that case and bring it back in 2 or 3 months before they finally give us what they felt like was a definitive cause for why this child died and what should have been done or could have been done to prevent it. So that's the caveat why you see 2016. So again, like I mentioned, we're going to talk about 531 cases that met the criteria for our review and were actually reviewed at the local level and came to us to clean, so to speak, and present to you. But overall, these are the causes of the whole 1529. Medical is always at the top, but you'll see on the next slide, many of those are not reviewed because the child was considered what we call expected to die. But even when you look at all causes, the top 3 are still medical, sleep-related infant death, which should be pretty shocking to everybody in motor vehicle. So again, when I talk about all reviewed deaths, Dr. Carter would make sure that I explain to you that those are the cases that were reviewed by one of our 159 local review committees, then came to the state level for further review to be able to look through and sift through the data for cleanliness to make sure we were accurate in how we categorize those reasons that those kids died. As you all know, in Georgia by statute, we only review 0 to 17. That's also very important to mention. Under 18, 0 to 17. So when you look at the cases we looked at, 531, sleep-related is still the #1 leading cause of what we call preventable deaths in Georgia. So again, Department of Public Health would have me make sure I mention that we're not talking about infant mortality due to medical causes and low birth rate, where's Lisa, things of that nature. We're talking about out of the 531 reviewed, 152, we were able to draw some type of inference to the fact that the child was sleeping in an unsafe sleep environment, everything else being equal. No signs of abuse or neglect or anything like that. And then again, you see motor vehicle is #2, followed by medical, homicide, and so on. If you have any questions, just stop and let me know. We're going through it pretty quickly and just hitting the high points. Again, we always have requests for information about all reviewed deaths by race and the breakdown for the demographics of what our makeup looks like. Typically in Georgia, this is pretty consistent where you're always going to see that African American is at the higher rate in terms of child deaths by race and ethnic group. Again, this is pretty consistent. When you look at all the reasons that kids die in Georgia, we break it out by sex. You're going to see that males are always at a higher rate. And then that's true for some categories as well, such as obviously drowning in motor vehicle. And, they'll ask us why, and there's no studies or correlations as to why some of you guys do the things you do, but you start young. So sometimes, they say boys are more adventurous, for example, with the drowning cases, more likely to wander off and find themselves in an unfortunate situation. And the same thing with motor vehicle. Our teenage boys seem to have that need for speed more, they say, although I beg to differ. I think I got a little bit of it. But the boys, they naturally do some things that we find are going to put them in a higher risk category. So as Lisa gets ready to come up to just touch on prevention a little bit, we want to make sure that we were highlighting for the purposes of the committee today. Again, we have priorities within the panel, within the agency, being these sleep-related cases, suicide, as well as reducing the firearm-related deaths. But because this is still the #1 leading cause of why our babies are dying in Georgia, it's important to highlight. And we also talk about fully on our website and some of the other pages that we all collaborate with DPH, with DFACS. There's so many things that we're doing in this area. We've actually seen a slight decline, so I was happy to report that for the first time in 4 years of the infant-related sleep cases. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa Dawson with Department of Public Health.
Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Representative Ballinger, committee members. I'm just absolutely privileged to be a part of the panel. The Department of Public Health is a standing member of the Child Fatality Review Panel, and I work closely with Dr. O'Neill to be active on that panel and supportive and collaborative, and I think we work well together, but it's an absolute privilege to get to work with the GBI. As Trevor was talking about sleep-related deaths, and we are seeing a little bit of a dip, that is very much in the SIDS cases. The SIDS cases, for the last 20 years, we've been having a campaign called Back to Sleep, and that's been effective. But now we've got to get even better with that. We've got to get kids in more safe sleep environments. One of the things that we'll talk about in terms of the sleep-related things is that, 79, one of the things that the third point says is that 79 infants are in an adult bed. That is the leading environment that babies are found in, and kudos to the GBI for doing the investigative kits that support law enforcement, because one of the things we've really struggled with over the years is that we didn't know how to define it and we didn't know how to count things. The unsafe sleep situation and definitions have evolved over the last 15 years. So this was really critical that we get very accurate information, and the GBI is definitely making that possible in their investigations. I want to go back up to the first bullet. Our former commissioner, Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald, who's now the CDC director, saw these numbers a couple of years ago, and she really felt passionately about doing something about it. So she also saw it as preventable. So one of the things that she did was she started a hospital initiative, which is in all 78 of our birthing hospitals. One other thing I want to talk about on this slide is it is very much that 30-day window, 30 days after a baby's born to 6 months, that is most critical. So if you have friends and family who have a new baby at home, please encourage them to put them down by themselves in an empty crib. It's just as simple as that, if at all possible. That's probably the one thing that we're trying to prioritize, but we're also trying to have a conversation with parents and empower them and let them know why. It's not so simplistic anymore, and people don't like to be told. Now, who likes to be told, what to do? It needs to be a conversation, so that's one of the things we've been working on. As Trevor mentioned, the 2016 data is starting to go down, and we're excited by that. We have a model that shows us saving some babies potentially as a result of all of these efforts, and I do want to talk about, some of the other efforts. I'm so thankful for DFACS. Bobby Cagle, when he was both at DCAL and DFACS, he instituted policies around safe to sleep. And he did a public health intervention within DFACS that was amazing. He had over 7,000 people trained on what safe to sleep is. Every employee, every social worker, every vendor, every contractor knew what safe to sleep was. That's a kind of saturation that we dream about in public health in terms of education efforts. So huge effort on and pull on DFAC's part. So you have the GBI helping us better report the deaths. You have DFACS helping us better educate people. You have DCAL now putting books in all the classrooms. And we have all the hospitals now giving out a gown, a bassinet, and a book to new moms. Our Medicaid population is 4 times more likely to have an unsafe sleep incident than our regular pay population. I think that's really important for y'all to know. In terms of this slide, just going back to Trevor's first slide, safe to sleep is number 1. We've got motor vehicle crashes are number 2, homicide, suicide. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a lot of great evidence-based and prevention efforts to put around this, and GBI's really led the way on this, along with DBHDD. And the Suicide Prevention Coalition of Georgia has done tremendous work for over 20 years. I've also been privileged to be a part of that work. So there's a lot we can do to support families and children in crisis around suicide prevention. Teens often end up in our emergency rooms, and we see that reflected in our hospital data, so that's really critical to understand. But what the GBI does with the CFR data is better help us understand those fatalities. And then finally, some prevention recommendations. I think I've already touched on your programs for Safe to Sleep. The First Lady's initiative around the hospitals with Dr. Fitzgerald is in high gear. We hope to have some data to report out to you later this year on that. The school-based health centers, I think, we need to reach teens where they're at. That's imperative, and again, like I said, GBI is really helping to lead that way. Siobhan has done some amazing work around that. And then the Governor's Office of Highway Safety also doing very critical evidence-based work around reducing teen driving fatalities. We work closely with them as well at Public Health. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
You do have, no, you don't, do you? Okay. I'll recognize Mayor Margaret regardless if she's flashing or not. So Representative Mayor Margaret Oliver.
Thank you very much. Do you know of the 92 motor vehicle deaths, how many were not in child restraints or not secured by seatbelts? Is that part of the investigation?
That's always part of the investigation and the reporting, and that information is pulled down when Dr. Carter does his analysis, and we have another report that breaks down the details specifically dealing with unrestrained children.
Do you know what percentage of the 92 were unrestrained?
Dr. Carter, do you know that right off the bat? He says he's good, but he's not that good. I always give him the, but we can certainly get that for you in just a few minutes. In addition, just to highlight again with the sleep cases, as Lisa mentioned, this is the first time, and I guess forever, I know since GBI has been involved, the number came down. One of the reasons we think there was an uptick as well is because of the improvement in child death investigations, because of all the training that has gone forward in this area. They were able to better identify that these cases were not SIDS cases. They were the result of a rollover, accidental suffocation, because the child's airway was obstructed. So that's the alarming piece that we're still trying to raise awareness about. So we think that that was part of the uptick as well. In addition, and we'll show a snippet if we have time as far as the efforts on the suicide prevention, because it was alarming last year that we saw the uptick. Director Keenan had us pull the numbers from the hospital, so although you'll see 51, 48, which one suicide of a young child as young as 6 in Georgia on record is too many, Director Keenan had us pull the information to be able to advise folks in our PSAs that we had over 1,000 kids who actually went to the ER because they had attempted or they had voiced. So that does help paint a bigger picture, a better picture for you all, that we lost 48, we lost 51, and the numbers were climbing, but there was over 1,000. So our kids in Georgia are in crisis.
Thank you. Representative Collins.
One of the questions I had about the undetermined deaths, and I know you do the post-mortem examination there at the medical examiner's office over there in Panthersville, and they do a remarkable job. And my chosen profession as a funeral director, we're a little more closely involved with this process than some may be. But with the 11 undetermined deaths, is that where, and just kind of from my information, when the medical examiner can't determine that based on the knowledge or skill set, do you ever send that information out to be looked at by another set of eyes other than just internally in the GBI?
Well, we do now. So again, it would take all day. We're just trying to pick the highlights. We're now a part of a study with the CDC, Sudden Death of the Young. We're the recipients of a grant where for the first time in Georgia, those undetermined deaths of kids, not just adults, not just infants, but 0 to 17, we're now consenting those those families to be able to take the blood sample that we acquire at autopsy and send it off for genetic testing.
Okay.
That has not been done before, so we've started doing that 2015. Because the baseline test that they do with the toxicology, histology,
Right.
and the examination post-mortem, there's so many other things that
Certainly.
cost about $1,000 a pop. So the CDC is paying for those genetic tests now, and that's the first time that's been done here in Georgia.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. 25. Representative, is that you? You're 26? All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you provide for us, not now, but later, a broader profile in terms of the calendar years? I appreciate having the 2016, but I'd like to see the trend lines for a longer period of time, maybe 5 years or something like that, because it's hard to see the upticks and the downticks. I know that you spoke about it, but I'd like to see it visually. And then
Yes, sir.
the second part is, in terms of the evidence-based analyses and research that you're doing, can you describe a little bit about what you're doing? Like, how many base years are you using? Can you give an example of a frequent analysis that you've done and what you found from that in terms of what's working? And
Sure.
We brought the trend data just in case.
Which mechanism of injury are you interested in
pick one.
specifically? So let's.
I'm most interested in suicide and the sleep from what you
Sure.
mentioned.
So for safe sleep, what constitutes an evidence-based intervention is usually on a list by one of the federal agencies. So in the Community Guide to Interventions that CDC puts out, they list, for let's say motor vehicle crashes, they list enforcement, equipment provision, and enforcement, equipment provision, and education as an evidence-based way to change behavior around child safety seats. So we borrowed from that for for Safe to Sleep. We put into practice, we said, hey, hospitals, if you want to be involved in this initiative to give out bassinets, gowns, and books, you must change your in-hospital policy to be up to date with the AAP. You must train your staff, you must model the behavior yourself, and you must educate your parents. So equipment provision, policy, education. So that's the evidence base that we're borrowing from for Safe to Sleep. For suicide, it's a similar list. It's also, but SAMHSA puts it out. So there's been different ones. I'm not as well versed in suicide because I haven't worked closely with it lately. But Siobhan, I'm sure, could answer those questions. But things like peer support, adult support, trusted adult support, gatekeeper training, those kinds of things in the past have been evidence-based. Now that's always evolving. So what we had 10 years ago may not be the current trend now. Does that answer your question?
Yes. So what I'm understanding is that you're taking the approach to evidence-based based on research that's been performed by the CDC and others. So you're not doing
Yes,
your
sir.
organic research in terms of what's working
No, sir.
here, but rather taking the best practices and applying it.
Yes, sir.
Got it.
Now, but we do have 3 very rigorous evaluations on the Safe to Sleep program from the University of Georgia, specific to Georgia's program on the hospital program, and I'd be happy to share that with you.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that. Thank you.
And then if you would like the trend data, I actually happen to have it, the 5-year trend data.
Did you have a question? Okay. What number are you? 18. Okay.
Thank you so much for this information. I want to ask 2 questions. One question is, what is the percentage out of all of these child deaths of the kids that are in foster care system?
Dr. Carter, we have an agency-involved chart, I believe, for the extensive report that we'll be filing to you through Representative Ballinger on tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that question is
There's,
often
that big
asked.
book that we get every year, so that information will be in that big book. I kind of wanted them to kind of hit the highlights today, but I'm very appreciative of, as somebody who serves on the panel and is involved in the panel, and I've served on a local child fatality review as well as, now I'm on the statewide as speakers appointment. So I'm appreciative of the committee's interest, and certainly it will offer any questions that y'all have as far as the ongoing work of the child fatality review. But that will be part of the report that's released tomorrow. But
And my second question is, can you tell me the difference between the unknown and unknown intent?
Dr. Carter, you care to elaborate? Since
You
he
knew
provides
you were
me
going to
with
have to
that.
come up to the podium
Yes.
at some point, Dr. Carter.
Unknown intent probably applies most often between accidental and suicide. It's where the intent, it's where it's not known whether the death was due to simply accidentally handling the weapon or was an intentional suicide. That's an example of an unknown intent. It comes up in other examples. Unknown simply means
It's
that
just
the
that.
one being addressed is that the results of the investigation, we could not determine the cause of it.
All right, thank you.
So some of those cases fall in the gray area. If we are not 100% sure as a result of the criminal investigation that it was a suicide, it will not be categorized as a suicide. If there was any doubt still, it lives in the gray area. That's the unknown intent because we may never know.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the GBI and the staff being here and certainly appreciate all the work that y'all do at the State Child Fatality Review. And to that end, there is a video that I would like to show, 60-second video. So nobody get, no popcorn, no Cokes, sorry. But we would like to see that
Yeah,
video.
I put it on here, but you can go ahead and introduce it.
Oh, okay. So, we conducted a series of peer-to-peer PSAs. And so we gathered.
With depression since I can remember. I just felt like I was just falling and falling.
At that point, the whole world just basically caved in.
It kind of feels like you don't matter.
I was really lonely. It just kind of felt like nobody cared. I thought it would be better just to end it.
I tried to kill myself.
I actually tried 4 times.
I tried to overdose on pills.
I have attempted suicide once.
I tried to overdose.
Last year, I had a suicide attempt.
You see cancer ads on TV. Where's the advertisements for trying to get people with anxiety disorders help?
Just because you're crying doesn't make you a weak person.
I don't know a kid that hasn't dealt with anxiety and or leading into depression.
You're not the only one who has this problem. Other kids have the problem. And by working together, you can get through it.
We need to get rid of the stigma around not being mentally healthy.
Pretty good with media and radio, TV and radio, but if you all have any influence whatsoever helping us get this pushed out to, we want it in all the schools. We want movie theater to be able to show the spots, and obviously we're limited because a lot of those areas, they require funding. So any help we can get pushing this out starting tomorrow, we would appreciate.
It will be on Lawmakers Monday. I'm going to be on there. So
Thank you. Thank you again, Representative Ballin.
all right. Thank y'all very much from the GBI. And we're going to get back on track, hopefully, and we're going to hear from DFACS. So as everyone knows, Director Cagle abandoned Georgia. and sailed off to the sunny shores of California to take the helm of the Los Angeles Department of Family and Children Services. But his deputy director, Ginger Pryor, stepped in, and she has been appointed interim director of the Department of Family and Children Services here in Georgia. So she's continuing on in some of that good work. So.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Ballinger and members of the committee. Thank you so much, Chairwoman, for first inviting me here today. It's really an honor to be here to update you all on our reform effort, our strategic plan, and some of the key initiatives that support that plan. As Chairwoman Ballinger stated, I'm Virginia Pryor. Yes, I am hopefully not a sad substitute for Director Cagle, but he did make such a significant impact on the child welfare system, and it really is an honor for me to be serving as interim director here in Georgia. Before I came to Georgia, some of you may or may not know, I have about a 27-year history or background in child welfare. I spent about 11 and a half years of my career at Casey Family Programs, which is the largest operating foundation that focuses solely on the issue of foster care, and spent time in about 46 child welfare jurisdictions, helping the leadership to think about how we could reform child welfare. So again, it's an honor for me to be able to do this work here, and it's an honor for me to be in such an environment where legislators are eager to know how the system works and to also to support the work and reach out and to help us to make sure that we improve outcomes for children and families. So in the interest of time, and I see Walter has our slides up, so thank you, Walter. You have the full presentation in front of you, but I'm just going to take a few moments of time just to highlight a few elements of our reform effort and our strategic plan. So first, on page 3 for you all in your report, I hope you have the report that is numbered now. This really began as Senate Bill 138, which you all are very, very familiar with, and that was really my entree into Georgia. I've been here now for about 3.5 years, but when I first came, Director Cagle lovingly gave me about 18 pages of a legal-sized document that was single-spaced of all of the things, the challenges that were happening in child welfare, and asked me to make sense of those issues and concerns. And so what we did was we really sat down, and those things really fell into 3 distinct categories. And that's the effort that you see here. One, it was our robust workforce. We really needed to pay some attention to the workforce, recruitment of our staff, but also retaining of our staff. The second was adopting a sound practice model, and the third was really engaging constituents in a meaningful way. Some of the feedback that we had received from a lot of our staff was that they had actually never seen any of the leadership from state office, the executive leadership, come directly to the counties and speak with them. And if you got called to Atlanta to state office, that was not going to be a positive meeting if you had the pleasure to come to 2 Peachtree. And so we knew it was something important that we needed to focus on, not just engaging with our staff, but we needed to focus on engaging with the legislature, engaging with our partners who help us to do this work each and every day. So through the support of the governor and the General Assembly, since 2015, we've added staff to both child welfare and to economic support, which has improved our caseloads. Right now, we have about 80% of the staff we need to do the work. When I came here, and actually when Director Cagle first got here, we were between 50 to 60% operational in terms of the staff we needed to actually do the work, which demonstrated high caseloads and also really high turnover. So when we brought on about 700 new staff, that helped us to lower the caseloads that we had. We were hovering around 36 to 38 cases per worker. Now, on average, we have 19, which is helping us to move in the direction that the governor set for us, which was to have 15 cases per worker. So we are well on our way. Also, we had about a 36 to 38% turnover rate, and now we are below 30% turnover in the state. And so as you can see, in a short period of time, because of your support, we are trending in the right direction, and we're going to keep trending in that direction to make sure that we have not only qualified staff, but staff that want to stay. You know, I think you can focus on always hiring and hiring, but if you can't keep staff, then you're going to be in this perpetual state of turnover. And so to see that changing, we're very excited about that. So I talked about the caseload sizes in child welfare. Now in OFI, which is the Office of Independence, or which is our economic support, we're at about 750 cases per worker because the work is is different. The standard or the average is about 600, so we're headed in that direction to equalize out those caseloads in OFI. And you'll also have a fact sheet in your packet. And in your fact sheet, just please note when you look at those numbers, I won't go over each of those individual fact sheets, but that's for fiscal year 17. So now I'd like to shift to our strategic plan, and that is on page 7 of your handout. And with these goals in mind, we developed the strategic plan so that division could help focus on 6 main goals, 6 areas in safety, self-sufficiency, permanency, well-being, workforce, and stakeholders. These goals really are largely based on our federal requirements. It's called the Child and Family Services Review and Economic Assistance. But in many cases where you'll see where we've set out our goal markers, we've actually exceeded those goals or to go above and beyond what the feds require us to do and to measure. So on the first goal I'll move to, and that is on page 9, is around safety. And that's to ensure that families and individuals are free from abuse and neglect. And I'd like to highlight objective number 1. And objective number 1 is to reduce the recurrence of maltreatment, which really means that when a child comes into care, we want to make sure that they're not repeatedly maltreated while they're in care. And so as you can see, the goal for the feds is 8%, and we want to be at 5% by July of 2019. And so we are well on our way of achieving that goal. We're currently at 6.3% of recurring maltreatment. And again, the feds ask us to keep this number below 9%, and we have consistently achieved that here in Georgia. But again, we've set our own goal and our own marker that we want to be at 5% by 2019. Our most intensive work towards this goal that's helping us to mitigate repeat maltreatment is our new practice model, which I referred to earlier, and that's solution-based casework, or SBC. Without getting into the technical elements of solution-based casework, I just really like to say it's just good old-fashioned social work. It is the way in which we interface with families to meet them at the level that they're at and address the needs that they have currently in the family and working with families in partnership. You will notice on the next slide that you'll have information that gives you a high-level overview of solution-based casework. It's evidence-informed practice that prioritizes working in partnership with families, focusing on pragmatic solutions to difficult situations, and we actually celebrate the positive outcomes that happen within families. Solution-based casework also combines empirical research on family development, clinical research, and knowledge regarding behavioral change and child welfare outcome studies to help staff stay focused on 3 key elements and tenets of which we call them. The first tenet is really to create partnerships and build consensus on problems in language and families. 2 is to focus that partnership on patterns of everyday family life and directly relate those to the threats of safety so families can understand that. And 3, we like to target solutions to specific prevention skills that caretakers need to create safety and reduce risk in those families. We're already beginning to see that solution-based casework is making a positive change in the lives of families. I had the privilege when we were actually out on our road shows to hear about a young child who came into care actually at birth because of the parent's substance abuse. And so he remained in care for the first 16 months of his life. And the reason that that child is now returned home is because our caseworker worked to build consensus with those parents, talk to the parents about the effect that their substance abuse was having on their child, work in partnership with the foster parents to help what we call shared parenting, that foster parents are working with birth parents, and now that child is returned home. Those parents have regained custody. And to hear a parent say that they would not have gotten their child back without the partnership with the division is a major shift when 4 years ago we were not hearing that kind of information from families. The division was not seen as a place that was helping families. We were seen as a place that took children from families but didn't necessarily work in partnership to return them. So that collective impact is really working to ensure that children are reunified with their families, and I couldn't be more pleased to continue to hear success stories like that. Now I'll move you to our second goal, which is around self-sufficiency, and that is on page 19. The goal for self-sufficiency is to ensure families and individuals have sustainable financial independence, voice, and choice in services, and are self-directed. So in objective number 1, we determined to increase the number of TANF recipients participating in countable work activity. The federal standard is 50%, but Georgia has consistently exceeded that standard to make sure that there are work activities. As you can see, we are at 66.22%. So we will continue to make sure that we go above and beyond to surpass the federal standards. One of the initiatives that helps us to be successful in that, I know many of you have heard of Gateway. So the Gateway Initiative, if you go to page 22 on your slides, I won't, read that slide verbatim, but as of September of 2017, we have successfully rolled out the new system in every county in the state, combining all states' eligibility systems into one full-service economic support system. Georgia Gateway is the largest IT project in the state's history. This streamlined application process really makes it easier and more convenient for individuals to apply for and track their benefits, and having one single application and a seamless coordination across multiple health and human services systems. So we are extremely excited about that, and it also protects taxpayers and reduces waste and fraud. Moving to our third goal, which is around permanency on page 24. The goal in permanency is to ensure that families and individuals are healthy and stable. I'd like to highlight now objective number 1 under that goal, and that's to reduce the number of times that a child in foster care moves from one placement to another. We want to be below or at the federal standard, which is 4.12 moves per 1,000 days in care. And that we want to have that done as of July 2019. Our goal is to ensure that children are in safe and stable homes and have the educational support and all of the things that they need to thrive. And when you move a child, research shows that every time a child moves, they actually can lose a grade behind in school. That's just one of the effects of multiple moves on a child. One of the initiatives that we're working on to make sure that we reach our goal of 4.12, we're right now at 4.8, is an initiative to become a Kin First organization. State law really requires us to seek relatives first in resources for youth in foster care. Research shows that children who must be removed have better outcomes when they're with relatives and they're in their own communities. They're better likely to have higher educational outcomes, fewer behavioral issues, fewer moves while in care when they're with relatives, and they reunify with their parents quicker, or they achieve permanency with a relative. Our goal is to have 50% of our children placed with relatives by the year 2019, and right now we are well on our way. We're at 29% of children across the state being currently placed with relatives. Our fourth goal is well-being. So if you turn to page 35, well-being is to ensure families and individuals have enhanced capacity to meet their physical, cognitive, and educational needs. And so I'll highlight objective number 2, and that is to increase the graduation rate to 85% by 2019. Considering where we started, 8% of children in foster care were graduating, and that's just I hate to even say that number out loud because that's just a dismal percentage rate. We're at about 11% now, and we set a pretty aggressive goal. But the reason we set this aggressive goal is because this is one area that affects a young person's ability to succeed as an adult if they don't have their education. Director Cagle and I were really impacted by education. He participated in something called the Annie E. Casey Fellowship Program. And when we took a look at the graduation rates of young people in foster care, his cornerstone effort was around Project Graduate. And Project Graduate was an effort that was piloted in 2016 and 2017 academic year in DeKalb and Fulton County, where we engaged 4 school districts: Atlanta Public Schools, Decatur City Schools, DeKalb County Schools, and Fulton County Schools. During that school year, the goal was to have 50% of 41 youth who participated in that cohort to complete high school or get a GED. At the conclusion of that project period, the data demonstrated that 41% of the cohort successfully graduated. we are going to continue that work and continue that focus on education. So recently, we contracted with Multi-Agency Alliance for Children, or MAC, and communities and schools to develop on-site support and to use strategies to keep children in stable placements and support their academic career through tutoring and school-based supports that they need. So again, we're starting this project in the metro area as we started Project Graduate, and the goal is to move that effort throughout the entire state. Now I'll move on to our fifth goal, which is workforce, and that is on page 44. The goal in the workforce is for the division to have a competent workforce, a professional and efficient workforce. Again, you'll please note that these figures represent fiscal year data in FY17, but our objective and objective number one is to decrease the turnover in the field by June 2019. We've seen improvements in this area, as I highlighted, but our ability to make sound judgment with families with dignity and respect hinges on having experienced staff. What we found early on in the turnover is that we have a very young workforce now. So you have folks that this might be their first job. They have barely been in what I call the craft, if you will. I'm an MSW, so that's what I say, the craft of the work, and it'll be about 2 years. And so when you have a very young workforce, it takes time to get that workforce trained and to ensure that they're seasoned. And so through your support, we've implemented a mentoring program to make sure that our staff have the appropriate mentoring, that our supervisors have the coaching and mentoring support, because it isn't just about hiring staff, it's about making sure that they have the tools and the training and the resource so that they can be proficient to be able to support families. So decreasing that turnover is going to help us to do that. And so we appreciate the investment that you've continued to make. One of the investments that I will highlight is that in our Office of Family Independence, OFI, the entry-level salary, because of the support from the governor and the General Assembly, moved up from $20,000 to $27,000 from $24,000 a year. Child welfare entry level moved up to $35,000 a year from $28,000. We couldn't have done that without your support. And that significant raise moved us up to market rate so that we were able to compete with other arenas in the workforce so that we could bring qualified staff to the division. Another story that you all, I think it's important for you to know that because of your support, again, out on a road show, we visit with all individuals across a cross-section of the community. We also meet with our staff. We had a staff person that got up in front of her peers and basically said that had it not been for the raise, she was thinking about how she was going to be able to take care of her child, do the much needed things that, whether it was school supplies, medicines, all of those things that families need to care for their children. The raise meant so much for her because she had been praying for years of whether or not she was going to have to leave something that she was passionate about in order to make enough salary to be able to care for her family. As a result of the raise, she was able to move to a better neighborhood, put her child in a better school, and that really gave her hope for the future. So that's pretty exciting to know the power of what you all have done has helped our staff to be able to stay committed to children and families. And that really is about hope. And that's what moves me to the next and final part of my presentation, and that's about hope. If you all turn to page 56 in your presentation, I'd like to talk to you a little bit today about State of Hope. And I'll start with a story that really impacted me greatly. I'm always reading information and things about things that happen to our families, whether they be here in our great state or it's something across the country. There was a man standing on the corner for months. He would stand on the same part of the corner. People in the community would just drive by. Nobody would really stop. They would just start to question, what's he doing there? Is this a problem? Should we worry about this? And a woman passed him several times. Well, one day she decided to stop. And when she stopped, she found out that the reason that he was sitting on that corner was because his mother had left him there and she had never returned. He also had mental health issues, but the only thing that he knew to do was to go back to that corner, just in case she decided to show up. So that woman took it upon herself. She was a restaurant owner. She embraced him into her home, gave him a job, and that individual now is a part of her family. And that's what we call collective impact. That's what we call when one person in their community makes a decision to lean in to help somebody that they don't know. And that really is what.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I turned-
That's all right.
I
That's
was
really
trying
what.
to turn it down, and I turned it up.
That's okay. That's really what State of Hope is all about. The division was really designed to intervene. So we come into play after something happens. What we have been talking about is we need to be about the business of prevention. If we can get on the side of prevention, then we can start doing things that are proactive and really start thinking about how can we actually mitigate children from coming into the foster care system. Prevention does that. How can we make sure that when children come into care, when we return them home, that they don't come back again? And so State of Hope is an opportunity for us through our collective impact as citizens to be able to make a significant difference in the lives of the families that we serve. So when you look at the slide, and I won't, go through and read the definition of State of Hope fully, but it really is about business, philanthropy, government, citizens in their communities, the folks that own the grocery store on the corner, really understanding what their role is in prevention and how they can make a difference. When I was with Casey Family Programs, the CEO started something called Communities of Hope, and that was several years ago. Casey Family Programs made a decision to partner with Georgia several years ago because the story is 7 angry judges. 7 angry judges in Northwest Georgia had enough about the system of care and that families weren't getting the support that they needed. So through their advocacy, they championed Casey Family Programs to come and work in the Northwest region of the state. And so what is there now in Rome is called Restoration Rome. Restoration Rome started from an abandoned building that cost $1, and a grant was then identified to rehab that school that was right across the street from a Section 8 housing unit. That Section 8 housing unit had the largest number of children that were coming into the foster care system. Now today, because of Restoration Rome, and the region of hope that is there, those families have access to food, those families have a clothing pantry, those families have access to CASA, the faith-based community, and a collection of supports and services right in their neighborhood that can focus on prevention of accessing and supporting families before they have to come to the attention of the division. So State of Hope is about raising up 14 regions of hope across the state that will be about prevention. We have an opportunity to change the trajectory of the lives of the citizens that we're called to serve. And so I am happy to be unveiling State of Hope. Many folks asked me when I had the privilege to take on the helm of the organization, is your vision going to change? And I say to you that the vision does not change. The blueprint for change is something that we are going to continue to focus on. We are going to finish what we started in the division, and we are going to evolve to a state of hope. That is what this work is about. It is our opportunity to have the blueprint for change plus a state of hope equals safe families, safe children, strengthened families, and a stronger Georgia. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you here today. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Representative Gravely has a question.
Yes, sir.
Director Pryor, thank you so much for presenting to us today, for the work you're doing. How does Georgia, you mentioned the raises that we had been able to bump up for some of the workers. How do we compare to other states? Are we in the middle? Are we above? Are we below of how other workers are being paid in there?
It really, it's an interesting question because it really depends. In some states, because they're county administered, we're state administered. And so, for example, if you go to North Carolina and Buncombe County, because counties are administered through the county, their salaries are $55,000 a year, but it's not statewide. So you might go to another part of North Carolina and the salary will be different. The same in LA, they're county-based, so it's different. Others, it depends on the market rate in the part of that region. So if you're in New York, the salary is going to be higher because the cost of living is a little bit higher. But now we are in the mid-range. We did take a look at like positions across the state. We did take into consideration some national aspects, but we really wanted to be on par with like positions that were, whether it was mental health or going to the hospitals. We were losing, our staff to becoming a hospital social worker. You can work from 8 to 5. You don't have to.
There's no on call. There's no weekends.
You're not getting a call at 3 o'clock in the morning to go out into a neighborhood. But we are on par here, but it will vary nationally.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Pryor, I just want to say thank you. That was a really terrific presentation, and I also want to commend your team for these materials. They're substantive and they're very easy to read, so great job putting them together.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Oliver.
I agree that perhaps from my view, the most important evidence of well-being for children in foster care is do they graduate from high school. I was involved in a fairly in-depth discussion recently on the Commission of Children about what's the true rate of graduation of foster care children, and we didn't believe, after sharing a lot, that it was 8%, but we came to the conclusion that we didn't know what the graduation rate is today. So in your spare time, I'd like a little bit more information on that, why you think it's 8%, what percentage of your foster care children have IEPs, which indicates they may be on something other than a GED or high school graduation. It's a really important statistic, and I don't think that we know enough about where the foster care children are educationally.
Absolutely. I'll make sure to get you a report on that information.
Thank you, Representative Oliver. Representative Spencer.
Thank you for your presentation. This question is a little more specific in terms of, I guess, operations of assessing individual cases, especially in the neonatal period, less than 90 days, when a child may have a long bone fracture that obviously sets off a red flag. And particularly, I had a case in my district that was similar to this situation. And the question I have, I guess, for you, Director, or maybe someone in your department who can answer this, when a long bone fracture is identified, and does the department normally test for genetic disorders that could be the cause of a long bone injury, or is that something that's not typically done?
You know, I'll be honest with you. I'd have to talk with my staff, because I would say to you now, that's not something that we would normally, test for. Now, we have strong partnership, whether it be with Northside Hospital or with CHOA, and we actually have something called the Medical Network that Dr. Greenbaum and our partners at CHOA go out to help educate us. So when we see fractures or, subdermal hematoma, our staff really aren't equipped or educated, in the medical profession, maybe sometimes to be able to ask that question. But with the partnership with the Medical Network, they now have the opportunity to take a case before the Medical Network and get advice, and then get guidance about additional questions that we might need to ask that our staff just aren't trained or equipped to ask. However, I will make sure that I go back and specifically ask. We have kind of a SWAT team, if you will, of experts in the department that take a deeper dive into cases, and so I'll make sure to ask that question and follow up.
Yeah, specifically the neonatal cases that have those red flags. I had a case in my district where this situation sort of turned out to be not an abuse situation. So just that's something to look at. Maybe that's something you may need to implement in your mentoring program with the new staff, is to sort of expose them to that kind of real possibility when assessing these cases.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sir.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Representative Spencer. Thank you, Director Pryor. I appreciate all of your efforts and work, and look forward to partnering with you in the future. I appreciate your taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you.
Next, we are going to hear from Youth Villages. For those of you watching the clock, we are running a little bit behind, so we will be kind of holding questions to the end and kind of wanting to kind of truncate things down. So we will. Hi, introduce yourself to the committee, please.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, and first of all, thank you so much, Chairman Ballinger and all the members of the committee. My name is Tanya Anderson, and I am the Executive Director for Youth Villages Georgia. I have been with Youth Villages 14 years now, and I'm excited about the opportunity to introduce Youth Villages to you guys and answer any questions that you may have after I provide the presentation. Youth Villages is a national organization that was founded in 1986. And we provide services in 13 states across the nation, one of them being here in Georgia. We began offering services in 2008 through community-based services, and then in 2009 we began residential services. Since we began in Georgia, we served over 2,500 young people and families through 3 levels of services that we have here in the state. Over the last year, we have served 400 children and families through the services that we offer here in the state. There are 3 services that we offer, and I would like to provide you a summary for all 3 of them, and then also offer some stories about the success of those programs for children and families that have been served. First is our residential program out in Douglasville, Georgia, and it's called the Inner Harbor Campus. We sit on 1,200 acres of land, and we have 128 beds that we are able to serve children in the program. A lot of the children that we provide services to have major challenges with mental and behavioral health issues, and I know that you heard the information from the GBI about suicidality and a lot of the suicidal ideations that they're experiencing. Those are some of the children that we're serving in our programs out on the campus. And so we have young people that have had challenges and experiences with abuse and neglect and even trauma. And so when they are able to come to the program, they see some traditional services such as individual, family, and group therapy, but we also offer some integrative and unique experiential services such as equine therapy, animal-assisted therapy with some of the dogs that we have. We even have therapeutic gardening, an outdoor kitchen to help with culinary arts. We do have a SACS-accredited school on our campus. And so we are able to do some really good work in a safe and secure environment and still address the needs for treatment that children may need. And we incorporate their families. For us, it is all about permanency, and our goal is not to keep children in the program long term. Our average length of stay in the residential program is 7 to 9 months. And we work collaboratively with anyone that's involved, so parents, caseworkers, probation officers. Once we are able to stabilize a young person, we work diligently to move them back into the community with natural support. So if they're not able to go to their natural families or their foster families, foster to adopt, or even independent living. The second program that we offer here is called Intercept. It's an intensive in-home program, and we serve children and families in 8 of the metro counties for Atlanta. Today we have about 21 families that we're serving, but we are certainly have the capacity to serve more. We work very closely with the Department of Family and Children's Services. We work closely with the Mayor Group, and we also work very closely with the Multi-Agency Alliance for Children to provide these services. The very unique thing about intensive in-home services is it takes the concept of it takes a village to raise a child. And we expand on that because when we just take that statement alone, we exclude the supports that are necessary for children to live successfully in the home. And we like to essentially say that it takes a village to strengthen and to support the parental figure that will be able to best raise that child in their home communities. And so we do just that. And even though we may receive a referral for a specific child or young person, our focus really is on that entire family and supporting the parents or the parental figure to strengthen their parenting skills, have access to resources, connect with the schools so that children are on target educationally in their community schools. We also teach them how to advocate for their children if there are things that their child may need, but they're not sure how to get the necessary resources. There are a lot of good things that we do that ensures and supports and reinforces to the family that they are the best person to raise their child, and we will do the best that we can to support them in that for anywhere from 7 to 9 months. We also offer independent living, and our model is called YV Life Set, and we serve young people between 17 and 22, and we meet them where they are. So if they are currently in residential programs, or if they are living with family members, or even if they are homeless, we work with them to secure housing. We work with them to apply for college. We work with them to apply for jobs. Any of those things that will help them to move into independence and be successful on their own, and also to create other natural supports along the way so that they are productive members of the community. And so in those 3 programs, we have a lot of support, not just from state agencies and contracts that we have. There's a lot of support with CMOs, and there's a lot of support with private providers. A great example is with our residential program. We were able to expand the capacity from 112 to 128 based on the needs for serving young girls who were having major issues with suicidal behaviors and suicidal ideations because of experiences with trauma, neglect, abuse. And so that work was directly done through the support of Stephen Tyler, and we were able to open up a program called Janie's House this past November. So those are all the great services that we offer here in Georgia, and we wanted the opportunity to just talk to you about that. You will find that the work that we do directly aligns with some of the things that Director Pryor mentioned, and a lot of the great things that MAC, and I think that you will hear from one of their programs following me, that we all work together as a community, as a village, to be able to support children and families in living successfully, independently, and healthy in the communities.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions? I don't see any from the committee. Okay. I know Micah has been out to your facility.
Yes.
Absolutely, and I would encourage, Tanya, thank you so much. Well, we're very proud of Youth Villages in Douglas County. I've been out to the campus several times, participated in some drum circles with the kids.
Yeah.
So I would encourage any member of the legislature to get out. Stan or Helen can help organize a tour, but it's a wonderful facility doing good work out there.
We welcome.
Thank you for those kind words. I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. Our next, and for those kind of keeping track, we will have to start. I'm going to have to start being a little bit mean. We have already run over 10 minutes of our committee time that we had allotted. So I will be the people moving forward. Y'all will only get 5 minutes. So just kind of in the interest of brevity. So next we will hear from Empowerment Resource Center. Thank y'all for being here. That mic is on, and check and see, tap that one. Okay, they're both on, so you're both mic'd. And just so you know, I will cut you off if you go too long. So if the first speaker hogs all the time, get mad at them.
I won't be a diva.
No pressure. But anyway, so just introduce yourselves to the committee. Let us know who you are, and we look forward to your presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, awesome. I'll try not to be a diva. My name is Anthony Reeves Stover, and I would like to thank you for listening to us. Before you have 26 years of foster care experience. I myself, I spent a little bit over 12 years in Georgia's foster care system, and I now currently I work as a staff for MAC, which is the Multi-Agency Alliance for Children. I come representing Georgia Empowerment with my colleagues here, and I really want them to share their story. We work as a youth leadership group that makes sure that foster care youth have a voice in the system, whether that's creating policies or programs such as TeenWorks or making sure that youth are not overly medicated while they're in foster care, but also to advocate on the behalf of the Connected by 21, which my colleagues will talk more about.
So hello everyone, I'm Naila Ennis. I'm 23 years old. I'm a senior at Valdosta State University, and also I'm a former foster youth and lead advocate for Georgia Empowerment. I aged out when I was 18 years old, and so a lot of traumatic experience in dealing with the foster care system. I dealt with going from home to home, even residential care facilities, and I experienced a lot of educational instability, such as, moving from home to home. I couldn't have a stable placement within my schooling as well. So, and that also reflected in my post-secondary journey. Yet I graduate May 5th, 2018 with my bachelor's in sociology and anthropology, and I plan to go to law school to participate in child welfare reform. But getting here wasn't that easy, so I transitioned with my biological father after aging out, and that was an experience in itself. I didn't opt to age back in because I thought I didn't want to be associated with DFACS, but so this is my only shot that I have. And when I wanted to participate in extended foster care services, when I realized being with my father was not going to work out, it was kind of too late. I almost failed out of high school because I wasn't getting adequate support, and I had to take a 2-hour bus and train ride and a 20-minute walk to go to a different school in a different county due to my dad's district. So things of that nature, if it wasn't for my grandmother and that support, I probably wouldn't be here where I'm at today. And so then I went to my post-secondary journey. And you would think, well, that was a happily ever after, and it wasn't. So I failed my freshman year due to not knowing how to manage my well-being post-foster care. And a lot of that could have been avoided if I took advantage of extended foster care services. So all in all, I please ask of you to support extended foster care services, also known as Connected by 21, and future state legislation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shannon Johnson. I'm 21, and I'm a mother of a 6-year-old. I'm an advocate with Georgia Empowerment and also a participant of Teen Parent Connection, which is a statewide initiative catering to parenting teens. I was in foster care for 6 years, and I was fortunate enough to receive services up until 21. But at age 18, I thought I was fully prepared to be an adult. I was moving into my first apartment, attending college, working, and taking care of my daughter, and then life happened. I began having car issues, I lost my job, and I eventually dropped out of school. Fortunately, I was still in foster care, and I was able to utilize extended foster care services. But just imagine, sorry, I skipped over something. So the Division of Family and Children Services covered my housing expenses, provided a food stipend and a living stipend to get household supplies. But just imagine if I didn't have the services to fall back on. At age 20, with a 5-year-old, I would have been facing homelessness. I say this to say that foster care services up until 21 are very essential, and especially in my case. And oftentimes, life happens. And traditionally, young adults have their families to fall back on when life spirals out of control. And unfortunately, foster youth like me don't have that family to fall back on. And if those services hadn't been in place, who knows where I've been. So I urge you all to support the Connected by 21 bill. Thank you.
Yes, definitely thank you for listening to us.
Okay, well, I certainly appreciate it. It doesn't appear that you have any questions, but I certainly do appreciate your taking the time to share your experiences with the Juvenile Justice Committee here today for the Georgia House. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and our final presentation will be Voices for Georgia's Children will be giving us an update on children's mental health. Thank you. Welcome, Polly. Do you need video or audio? Okay. Oh, thank goodness. Because I have to really turn it up.
Sorry.
All right.
Oh, okay. Usually I just yell.
Ask.
Parent of teenagers. I'm used to just yelling at people. Hi, I'm Polly McKinney, Advocacy Director of Voices for Georgia's Children, and we will be very, very fast. I just wanted to introduce Voices. I think pretty much all of you know what we do. We cover the waterfront and children's issues from child health, juvenile justice, and child welfare. And we have just released our child behavioral health workforce analysis on Monday. We also put a bunch of fact books on your desks yesterday with lots of facts about children. I'm sorry. I think it was yesterday. I think it was yesterday. But anyway, in interest of time, I'm just going to introduce our Executive Director, Erica Fennersit-Koff, who's going to talk about children's mental health. And she's a licensed clinical psychologist as well, so she actually, unlike me, has great depth in this field. So, Erica.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Ballinger and the rest of the committee for the opportunity to share with you some information today. In the interest of time, I can not do the PowerPoint and just give the Cliffs Notes version, cover some key highlights. But you have fact sheets with you, and then also you have more information in the fact books that we dropped off. There are two things that I'm going to cover the highlights of today: the Governor's Children's Mental Health Commission recommendations, as well as some highlights from the workforce report. When Trebor and GBI were mentioning earlier the 1,000 children that show up in the ER for suicide attempts, the Georgia Department of Education actually does a survey every year of our high school students, and last year they found that 80,000 students reported seriously considering harming themselves. And so the number is very large, but that also means we have a great opportunity right now to address the issue. And we believe that the recommendations from the Commission, as well as from our workforce report in parallel, can make a significant difference in the immediate. The commission was established in June and put forth recommendations to the governor in December, and you see some of those recommendations realized in the governor's proposed budget. There were 8 recommendations that generally fall in 3 areas: intervention, prevention, and training and supports. And they actually touch on some of the things that you heard today: school-based health access and expanding school-based mental health programs, employment, helping youth find employment, because we know that one of the greatest barriers to maintaining your recovery is being able to be gainfully employed after graduation. Opioid prevention, as well as suicide prevention. That also includes money to help increase the hours for our hotline that's open to extend into evenings and weekends. And as we know, that's one of the critical times when youth are in need of support. High fidelity RAP services, and that's one of the programs that have been most demonstrated effective in Georgia to help keep kids out of residential placements, as well as help them transition successfully into their families and communities following residential placements. And this it would be to expand that program. And then lastly is around crisis response, both providing supports for kids needing specialized services who are in foster care, as well as helping prevent kids from languishing in our ERs, which we see now, to be able to either prevent that from happening in the first place or having somewhere safe and helpful to go when that happens. I'm going to transition now to some highlights from our workforce report. And this was extensive research done over many months. We spoke to countless providers, training programs, hospitals from across the state, and that translated into some key findings and 17 recommendations. And they fall, some of which will have an immediate impact, some will see long-term growth of the workforce, and the others will just simply provide the state with the tools that they need to be able to make strategic decisions about our workforce. And I'm going to give you just a few highlights in those areas, and then you can read more in depth. One of the recommendations comes around some transparency and increased reciprocity. We heard time and time again, particularly impacting our military families and their spouses, that it's unclear how they can lend their services and expertise in Georgia, or providers that are in around the border of our state to be able to provide services. And so our recommendation is to research further what we could be doing around reciprocity. Another is linking degree programs to community providers and agencies. So we heard time and time again that providers are graduating simply ill-equipped to deal with some of the more serious issues they're seeing. They're seeing 11-year-olds who are expressing thoughts of suicide, and they're just not able to deal with it, and they're entering the workforce and quickly leaving after 30, 60, 90 days. And we believe there's work that we can do linking not only the curriculum around evidence-based practices, so our graduates are graduating with that, versus right now we're trying to backtrack and train large numbers of providers in our communities that have already graduated, and link them to placements in communities so they can get that training while they're in school, and then also have a place to get their supervision after. We are losing large numbers of our new graduates from med schools, psychology doctoral programs, master's social work programs to other states because we don't have the positions available to them to get their hours towards, their supervision hours towards licensure. And lastly is just being able to know where our providers are right now. So as we were looking, as we set out on this workforce report, we wanted to do a map of all the providers that are currently seeing children and adolescents in our state. And that was much harder than we thought to be able to do that. And so one of our big recommendations is giving the state the tools that they need to be able to make decisions. So one easy way to do that is when you renew your licensure, you fill out a very brief survey that indicates whether you're actively seeing clients and what's the age range that you're seeing them and where you're practicing, and that's it. And that's something we'll be able to equip groups like the interagency directors teams and others to be able to make some strategic decisions moving forward. So Did I do that in 5 minutes or less?
No, you went over, but it's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I tried really hard.
But Jay Powell is going to be along and kicking me out of of the committee room, so Ways and Means can usher in at 3. So with that, the Juvenile Justice meeting, inaugural meeting, is adjourned. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming.
You.